from New York. It's the show that was named. What were we named again?
We won the Awfully from
Yes.
Awful Announcing.
Yes, it said
Best
that.
debate show.
Yeah, that's great.
How about that?
It said we don't make caricatures out of ourselves. Also coming up in an hour, I'll pretend to be a groundhog. I can predict the future. It's the first hour of First Things First. We start with Justin Herbert and the Chargers, 2 touchdowns, some gritty runs to storm back from a 21-10 deficit to beat the Broncos. Just a lot of adjectives there, so I'm probably could have known that. 100% honest with you. Herbert down 10. Previous 10 games. Had never won one. Remember, they always get close.
Yeah.
Always a break.
And they had
never
lost, I
brag.
think, 11 straight decided by 3 points or fewer. This obviously doesn't.
Was able to
change
pull
that,
it off.
yeah.
So were you impressed with Justin Herbert?
100%. Games like that are what make you a franchise quarterback. Like by the strictest definition, not just franchise quarterback, but like the guys. Games like that. And for Justin Herbert, the Justin Herbert discourse has always been tricky because the eye test cuts both ways with him. So if you were to be like, hey, what's your evidence that Justin Herbert is better than Brock Purdy? You really can't present it other than,
Look at
I know it. Like, and even Bruce, a Purdy guy.
I like Herbert
but it's
better,
like,
yeah.
well, who wins more? Brock? Who has better stats? Brock? Who has playoff success? Brock? Who's better? Oh, it's the other guy. Right. So, like, but you just know it. But the other side to that eye test has been, what's the evidence that some of this, the mediocrity of his teams and those records in close games fall on him? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I watch the games. And I've seen a lot of spots where critical moments, there's plays to be made, he doesn't make them. Most famously is the second half of the playoff game, but it's not always that egregious. It just the previous week, multiple 4th down completions short of the sticks and just like little things where it's like, that it factor that I can't prove to you. I can't show you an EPA or a quarterback rating, but I feel myself that I'm a pretty discerning football watcher. And the same reason I know he's better than Tua when that was the big debate. I know he's better than Brock. I also know he is, in his career, come up short in a lot of these moments. Yeah. And last night, he did all of the things you want your star quarterback to do with his legs, with his arm, with his poise. The Broncos obviously lack of poise, and some of their mistakes helped him. But, yeah, so this is the player that he's always had the talent to be. And in order to be that guy, you don't have to do this every time your team's down 10, but like Mahomes does seemingly, but you have to do it some of the time your team's down 10, like the other great quarterbacks do.
You know what's interesting with him? And last night he broke the record for most completions by a player before they turn 27, before a quarterback before he turns 27. But also he has the most come-from-behind touchdowns or go-ahead touchdowns in the 4th quarter or overtime since 2021. Here's the list. So he's number 1 with 12.
Weird.
Stafford, Geno, a couple of Knicks guys on there. Dak, Cousin. Yeah. It's a weird list, but he tops it. So you're right, Nick. I mean, I said yesterday, I talked about him having to beat good teams, him having to win close games, and yet he does own
he has those.
That
That's
record.
why I said you can't prove, like, it's almost an eye test.
I got to be honest. I put a lot of it, and you guys know this, on Staley. I'm sorry, Brandon Staley, like his previous coach. He had Anthony Lynn as a rookie. Then he had Staley for several years, for what, 3 years? 3 years. And now he's got Harbaugh. So he's got all the physical tools. He's tough physically. Like last night, he's even playing through an ankle injury. And the question is, will he have those intangibles? I'm going to say this too, though, and Harbaugh's done a great job. When I watched that game last night, you know what I'm saying? Unleashing. Throw the ball more. They don't have a Derrick Henry, a Saquon Barkley, even a Josh Jacobs in the backfield, with all due respect to Dobbins and Gus Edwards. But he is throwing the ball. 23 quarterbacks throw it more than him. He's only throwing 28 a game.
They've upped it more as the year went on.
But it's still 28 a game. And all the other, like, just strong arm passers, are throwing it 30 times or more. Lamar doesn't, but he's obviously unique with his running
That's what
ability.
led to the pick, though, too.
No, but here's the thing. He's not a high interception guy. His interception percentage for his career is third best ever, 1.6. So I know the one year he had 15 picks, but he had 38 touchdowns. Like, his interception percentages are never, like, astronomically high. So I don't know. It's just Harbaugh's style. But if you want to beat the Kansas Cities and even maybe next year the Cincinnati's and the Baltimore's, you're going to have to put up more than 22 points a game or whatever they're
Not for the
scoring.
Chiefs. You could do that.
Well,
22
not in the playoffs.
Well,
I don't
what
think.
do you think would happen if the Chargers played the Chiefs? I wonder.
I'm just saying. I said we don't need to score 35
You don't think
points.
they should throw him? This dude is
At the
a
same
great
time,
quarterback.
well, we'll do that, and then 5 segments from now, I'll be like, run the ball, control the clock, keep Mahomes on the sidelines. So we have it a little bit both ways.
I wanna see
Quickly
him throw
before we
a
get to the Broncos, eye test. I'm an eye test guy and a quarterbacks wins guy, so this is perfect for me. This play in the 1st and 10, 24-19, needs this. They thought he was going to throw it away, but
That's
the parking special right there.
Right. That's the play that makes Danny say he's one of the 7 or 8 most talented quarterbacks
So
in
good.
NFL history.
Yeah, that just
and that he's better than Burrow and better than Lamar. That's too much for me. But so, one of the criticisms, I'm gonna mix metaphors here, that you have heard, I don't know if you have lobbed at him, but you have heard, we've certainly discussed, lobbed at Tatum previously, was that he's almost, it's like too much drill work.
Yeah,
and that he's out there, that you can see him, it's like, okay, I
Not
worked
as
on this, I'm going to do that.
right.
That has been a weakness of Herbert's, which is why plays like that
That's
are so
interesting.
important. He does at times feel too robotic and almost too like read 1, read 2. All right, those aren't there. I guess I got to go to the check down. Like, you know what I mean? And so the tapping into the jazz of the game, so to speak. You know what I mean? The improvisation of the game. When you have that running to your left, not even flipping your hips and throwing that pass.
That was incredible.
There's not 5 other guys in the league that can do that. And so there's not 5 that can make that throw. Patrick, Josh, and him and Stafford might be the only guys who can make that exact throw. Burrow, I think's the top 3 quarterback in the league, can't make that throw. He does things differently, and so that's what makes him special. Wilds wrote down Drake May on his paper, by the way.
First of all, don't look at the paper.
That's what he
Gone
wrote
over
down.
time. You just cheating on the paper. You've seen Drake's play.
Drake May might be able to make him one day.
Meanwhile, the Broncos dropped to 9-6. Bo Nix, they looked pretty good, but there were a handful of questionable decisions and penalties that doomed Denver, including a late punt that the analytic nerds frowned upon. Okay, well, why do you think Denver lost?
I'll get to some of the things they did poorly. The Chargers are better.
That's true.
I mean, I think they're a better team. They've swept them now this year, 2-0. They got the better quarterback. Coaches, both are really good. So what are we talking? Like, both good defenses, pretty similar in that regard. So they should have lost. The game was in L.A. L.A.'s playing for – both of them had a lot on the line. But L.A. had, obviously playing for its playoff life. But they did make mistakes. I mean, and I guess the analytics nerds want to jump on him for punting in general.
I don't know if we need to throw nerds. It's just football people.
No,
just football
but
people is the wrong decision.
There's no reason to hit a guy making a fair catch. So that is the mistake.
Did he get pushed? I thought he got pushed a little bit.
Well, but I mean, but the thing
That
is this.
push, I think, is an odd
like,
rule.
you want to talk about
It's
nerds.
a strange, obviously strange.
You want to talk about
situation.
nerds for a second. Us nerds have been thirsting for the fair catch kick at the end of the half for years. It was last attempted.
Is that serious?
Yes, swear to God. It's like it was one of those.
I was like, what in the world?
So this is something
The white whale.
exactly. I mean, it was last attempted 5 years ago. Hasn't been made obviously in 50. But it is a coaching error to not be aware that thing exists and to kick it out of bounds. Because
interesting.
he could, because of the rules on the fair catch, anytime
You saying he should have kicked it out of bounds?
yes,
out of bounds
because
and then you're done.
Because anytime you fair catch a punt or you're trying to and you get penalized, you can do the kick they did. That type of kick you can make from 70.
Yeah,
because it's the type, it's a
back up.
kickoff and
Right.
there's no rush. You
Dudes
kick as low
can
as
do
you
that,
want.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
even without the penalty, they would have had the opportunity
That's
to
interesting.
try that. So that was a coaching error, and they also had a dumb penalty on a 3rd down where they roughed Herbert on the slide. That gave them 7 points when they would have kicked a field goal.
Oh, so without the penalty,
it would have been 15 yards further back.
Without the penalty, they still just fair catch. They still can try that.
Anytime in the game you want, if you fair catch a punt, you can do that on the next play. Nobody would ever do it except for at the end of half or end of game because it's like I'd rather have the drive. So my point is, I think that could have been good from 68 if you needed to.
You see them all the time on kickoffs.
Kickoffs, it goes through the.
It's like we're gonna sign this guy.
right. They got a 10-yard run up to the. But I'm gonna put it on this though, and that obviously was a little bit of a momentum shift. The defense, like. And they had. I'm not even talking about the penalties on the defense because the touchdowns by the Chargers in the second half were aided by penalties by Denver. But I'm talking about just your defense, which allows 18 points a game, 5th best in the league, gave up 15 in the 4th quarter, gave up 21 in the second half. All right, so if you've got that type of lead with that type of defense, you're supposed to hold it. And they didn't. And again, not even just talking about the penalties, but you have to, this is the strength of your team, and they let you down. So I will say on Denver's part, it's more so the defense than the coaching or the mistake.
And I don't think it's some super analytical, nerdy opinion that down 3 at midfield on 4th and 5 with 5 minutes left.
Go for it.
You should go for that.
Especially he went for it early.
Right, exactly. Like that wasn't. That's not like a newfangled. Oh, if you score a touchdown down 14, go 2. That to me was pretty straightforward and a mistake. And this is what I'll say because you know I believe in football gods. Football gods can be very vindictive, and teams that make those many mistakes at all different levels, coaching mistakes, special teams mistakes, defensive mistakes, they sometimes get penalized in the worst way possible. And Denver losing next week to Cincy and then losing to Kansas City and missing the playoffs outright, and the Bengals, who we have refused to write off all year, sneaking in through the back door.
Worst nightmare.
No, I love the idea of it. Bengals, Bills, round 1, give it to me. Oh, give it to me. So I'm just saying, if you're a Broncos fan, you're very, very nervous all of a sudden.
Right, more on the Bengals in a little while. A little bit of Schadenfreude, perhaps.
Okay.
Check in on the latest holiday hobby.
$60 million.
I think it's Schadenfreude, but that's okay.
It's not.
Yeah, you missed
not.
it.
Is
Really?
Schadenfreude?
Josh, figure out the pronunciation.
Oh, it's a different word. Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad.
This guy's still mad I called him a nerd. LeBron was asked about the All-Star game and the proliferation of threes and just changes to the game in general. Your reaction?
Go ahead, bro.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm glad LeBron spoke out. I mean, he obviously is the ambassador of the NBA right now.
Last night set the record for most minutes ever.
Yeah.
But,
and they, all of a sudden the
history.
Lakers are winning a few games over pretty good teams. Look, with the threes, because he was talking about the All-Star game initially, that's why he was asked about it. I remember when, the All-Star game's never been 48 minutes of hard-nosed basketball. But it's been fairly competitive through the first 3 quarters. And then 4th quarter, they kind of buckle down and really play. And it's always been entertaining. I always looked forward to watching the All-Star game. The year for me that it turned was 2015. So in 2014, the teams combined for the first time for 100 3-point attempts. And that game was fine. Kyrie won the MVP. It was fine. In 2015 in Madison Square Garden, I used to go to all the All-Star games. I was there, and I remember it was like Russell Westbrook won MVP. And when it came time to choose MVP, I was like, I don't even know how you're going to pick an MVP. Like, this was not really a game. It's just whoever had the most points, which was Westbrook. I think he had 41 or something like that. Because the teams combined for 133 3-point attempts. And every year it's been around that number or higher now. Last year it was probably much higher. But when you shoot that many threes, especially in an exhibition game where nobody's giving their all, the lane was just wide open for easy dunks and all that. And that's when the game became a joke. And that's always convinced me, Nick, that there is a threshold. And I don't claim to know exactly what it is. But there's a threshold to where, in a real game, not an exhibition one, if you take so many threes, it now becomes something kind of entirely different from what we know as basketball, real basketball, competitive basketball. We're getting closer. I don't think we've reached it quite yet. We've reached it where a lot of people are tired of watching it, but there's going to be a point where it's just like, what are we doing?
It's closer to horse than to basketball.
And whoever's hot, especially with the younger players, because they're growing up starting to play this way. It's just going to, whoever's hot from three is going to win the game.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think with LeBron speaking out on this, that major changes are going to start happening, if not next year, in 2 years. And I almost view it as...
You're talking about not to the All-Star game.
Not to the All-Star. I'm talking about the league in general.
The rules of the league.
And I thought that there's starting to be a growing mandate among the stakeholders in the league, which are the players, especially the superstar players. So we've now heard LeBron. And it was funny at the end of that. I don't know if you saw the whole thing. They're like, do you want to expound on it any? And he's like, Sacramento, I love you, but not right now. Yeah. So he's like, I'm not going to give the golden answer that I have to the visiting reporter. So he's got ideas that I think he wants to showcase. Also shows just how savvy he is, that it's like, this is important. I have to.
I'm not going to do it sitting in the
Sacramento.
Kings locker room.
He isn't right.
Yeah, I have to deliver it the right way.
They're covering that Sac State NIL story.
That's a big story, though.
They're not worried about it.
So it's the stakeholders, obviously the players and the superstar players in particular. The fans, which used to be just judged by attendance, but now you're starting to hear more clamor, whereas the league used to, any league that's sort of suffering, like, well, our attendance numbers. You saw baseball do that a little while until they kind of bailed on that. Media partners, which is already happening because of the ratings drop, so then our media partners are going to come to the table, and eventually the teams themselves. So once you get all those stakeholders around, I think you've got the mandate for change, and something major might happen, moving back the three, extending, moving the three, whatever it is.
So I look at this, and the reason that I did like 20 minutes on the pod on this, the day of NBA opening day, about my concern about the NBA, because to me...
Before any of this? Just opening night you did it?
Opening night. And it was, I mean, I'm not saying I got the ball.
You're early on
but what's right, right? So, it's good listening. You subscribe, download. And it was spurred by the fact that I wasn't as excited about opening night as I had been before, and so I was just kind of opining why. I love the NBA. I love the NBA. For all three of us, at one point in our careers, we were most closely identified with basketball. I mean, Brew was a legitimate reporter and columnist. You worked as a partner with the league. If that's the right way to put it, whatever. You created NBA television shows, and I was kind of like Cowherd's NBA guy when I first started. Like, that's how it got going. And my concern is that you have two issues right now that are totally unrelated. The three-pointer, how the game looks, needs to be addressed from a rules standpoint. The other one is all of the things about, we put it in load management, but it's not just load management, it's also about guys living up to the superstar mantle.
See, this is
and
we don't have 2 minutes on this.
I know, but so it's like, people are like, what happened? Why is the NBA as popular? It's like, well, they put a lot of their marketing ideas and dollars and eggs in Zion's basket. He has not lived up to it. They put a lot in Lonzo's basket. He got hurt, but if you remember, he wasn't going to live up to it, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Right. Zion, I feel worse about because I think he's done it to himself. They put a lot then in Ja's basket, and Ja's trying to recapture it, but Ja made some grievous errors in his personal life, and even if you didn't think the first one was that bad, after the first one, the second one makes it almost unforgivable. And so there is that cycle as well, where it's like, why are they still living off LeBron, Steph, and Durant? Because they're reliable adults. You know what I mean? Because they take their jobs seriously.
Was it Wolves-Lakers? What was the opening night game? Was Wolves-Lakers?
Sure. I don't know.
I remember an early game, if it was an opening night, and the story was LeBron and AD. And I'm like, Ant, why aren't you the story?
Right. Yeah.
You need to take this game. I think he just had a game. But it's like, if you're the superstar, you need to take that mantle.
So there's so much of the conversation is about the threes, which I think is important. I support massive rule changes on that, structural changes. But the other piece of it is, we also need, you need a Kobe to come into the league and be like, oh, I'm actually going to far exceed expectations, and even though I wasn't marketed as the star, become that guy. Like Wemby, I think takes it super seriously, and and so it's that.
The international guys take it serious. They really take it serious.
And so maybe the league needs to put more effort behind their marketing, and maybe you also need an American. Maybe it is Ant. You know what I mean? One of these guys that has draft pedigree, real hype coming in to really live up to and then exceed expectations. Because it's a big stew of reason that we don't feel quite the same. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.